I watched my boss sign my termination papers with a gold pen I'd given him for Christmas, and all I could think was, Monday is going to be spectacular. His name was Derek Vaughn. Chief Operating Officer. Corner office in downtown Seattle with a view he didn't deserve. He slid the folder across his mahogany desk like he was doing me a favor. Maya, we're restructuring. Your position has been deemed redundant. Redundant. That's the word he used for the woman who built the inventory management system his entire logistics operation ran on. The system I designed, coded, and patented 3 years before he ever walked through those glass doors. But I didn't correct him. I just nodded, signed where he pointed, and walked out with my box of desk photos and a half-dead succulent. Because some lessons are best taught on a Monday morning when the servers go dark and the phones start ringing. Let me back up. 6 years ago, I was a junior software engineer at Meridian Logistics, a mid-sized freight company in Seattle. We handled everything: cross-country shipments, last-mile delivery, warehouse coordination. The backbone of our operation was an ancient, clunky inventory system that crashed twice a week and required 3 people just to generate a single report. I was 26, ambitious, and tired of hearing drivers complain that their manifests didn't match what was actually in the trucks. So I started building something better. Nights, weekends, my tiny apartment in Capitol Hill with too much coffee and not enough sleep. It took me 11 months to finish. I called it StreamLine. Real-time inventory tracking, predictive logistics, automated routing corrections, and a dashboard so intuitive even our most tech-resistant warehouse manager could use it. I filed for the patent in my name, paid for it myself with money I'd saved from freelance gigs, and then I brought it to Meridian's then CEO, Robert Klein. He was cautious but fair. We negotiated a licensing agreement. Meridian could use StreamLine indefinitely, but I retained full ownership and patent rights. In return, I got a modest royalty on annual savings plus a promotion to senior systems engineer. I wasn't trying to get rich. I just wanted credit for my work and a guarantee that if I ever left, the company couldn't pretend they'd built it themselves. If you've ever created something and had someone else try to take the credit, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You'll understand why what comes next felt so personal. Robert retired 2 years ago. That's when Derek arrived. Derek Vaughn came from a consulting firm in Boston with a reputation for optimizing operational costs. Translation: he fired people and called it efficiency. He was 42, spoke in corporate buzzwords, and treated every meeting like a TED Talk audition. Within 3 months, he'd replaced half the senior staff with his own people, yes, men who nodded at his ideas and never questioned his numbers. I should have seen the warning signs. The first time I explained StreamLine to him in a meeting, he cut me off mid-sentence. Right, the system. Great work, team. Let's keep that running smooth. Team. As if it had been some committee effort. I started to correct him, but his assistant was already ushering in the next agenda item. I let it slide. Big mistake. Over the next year, Derek started taking credit for StreamLine's success in board meetings. I heard about it from Linda in finance, who sat in on the presentations. He'd show the cost-saving graphs, the efficiency metrics, the 5-star client reviews, and he'd say things like, "When I came on board, I knew we needed to leverage cutting-edge technology," as if he'd coded a single line himself. I scheduled a meeting to set the record straight. He canceled twice, then sent me an email saying we'd circle back next quarter. We never did. Then came the restructuring memo. 3 weeks ago, Derek called me into his office. No warning. No HR present. Just him, that gold pen, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Maya, I'll be direct. We're trimming the engineering team. Your role is being absorbed by our new IT director, Kyle Brennan. He'll handle systems oversight going forward. Kyle. A guy Derek hired 4 months ago who could barely restart a router without Googling instructions. You're firing me? I kept my voice steady. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me panic. Restructuring, he corrected, like semantics would soften the blow. You'll get 8 weeks severance. HR will handle the details. We appreciate everything you've done. Everything I've done. He had no idea. I asked the question I already knew he couldn't answer. What about StreamLine? Who's going to maintain it? He waved a hand. Kyle's got it covered. The system practically runs itself at this point. That's the beauty of good infrastructure. Good infrastructure. My infrastructure. The one I'd built from scratch while he was still riding elevators in Boston. I stood, shook his hand, because I'm professional even when I'm furious, and walked out. I didn't clean out my desk that day. I went home, poured a glass of wine I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. Here's what Derek didn't know, because he'd never bothered to read the licensing agreement Robert and I had signed. Meridian's license to use StreamLine was conditional. Specifically, it required that I remain employed by the company or that Meridian negotiate continued use if I left voluntarily. Termination, especially without cause, voided the agreement. Meaning, the second my employment ended, Meridian's legal access to my software ended with it. I'd built a failsafe into the code years ago, back when I was paranoid about someone trying to steal my work. If the licensing server didn't receive a valid authentication token every 72 hours, the system would lock. Not crash, that would have been cruel to the drivers and warehouse staff who relied on it. Just lock. A polite message on every screen, license authentication required. Contact system administrator. And since I was the administrator and Derek had just fired me, well, Monday was going to be very interesting. I didn't have to do anything dramatic. I just had to not renew the token. My last day was Friday. The token would expire Sunday night at 11:47 p.m. That weekend was surreal. I went to brunch with my best friend Ava, walked around Green Lake, watched terrible reality TV. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was Meridian realizing their mistake. It never was. Saturday afternoon, Kyle, the new IT director, sent me an email asking for the admin password to the logistics dashboard. I replied with a polite note explaining that all access credentials had been transferred to HR per company policy and that he should follow up with them. HR didn't have the credentials, of course. I'd never given them the master authentication key because it wasn't part of my employment file, it was part of the licensing agreement, which apparently no one had read since Robert retired. Sunday night, I sat on my couch with my laptop open, watching the countdown. The system would lock at 11:47 p.m. I could have renewed the token. Could have given them one more week, one more day. But why? They'd made their choice. At 11:48, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Kyle. I didn't answer. Then Linda from finance. Then someone from the warehouse. Then Derek. I let them all go to voicemail and made myself breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The small pleasures of unemployment. If you're loving this so far, hit that subscribe button, because the best part is still coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Derek finally figures it out. By 9 a.m., I had 43 missed calls and a dozen increasingly frantic emails. The gist: StreamLine was locked. Drivers couldn't access routes. Warehouses couldn't process shipments. The entire company was dead in the water, and they had over 200 deliveries scheduled that day. At 9:32, Derek finally called again. This time I answered. Maya. His voice was tight. We're having a system issue. I need you to walk Kyle through the reset process. I'm no longer employed by Meridian, Derek. You made that clear on Friday. This isn't the time for, he caught himself. Look, I apologize if the transition felt abrupt. But right now, we have clients waiting, and we need that system operational. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. The system is operational, I said. It's just not licensed for your use anymore. Another pause. Longer this time. What are you talking about? StreamLine is patented intellectual property. Licensed to Meridian under an agreement contingent on my employment. You terminated me. The license expired last night. I could practically hear the gears turning. Then, you can't do this. I didn't do anything, Derek. You did. You fired the person who owned the system keeping your company alive. You want access back? We can negotiate a new licensing agreement. My rate is $15,000 a month, plus back payment for the 3 years you've been using it without acknowledging my ownership. He sputtered something about lawyers. I stayed calm. Feel free to call them. They'll tell you the same thing I am. Have a good Monday, Derek. I hung up. The next 6 hours were chaos for them. For me, it was strangely peaceful. I went for a run, answered a few emails from recruiters who'd been circling since word of the restructuring got out, and checked my phone occasionally to watch the disaster unfold. Linda sent me a text, Derek is losing it. Board called an emergency meeting. Please tell me you have a plan. I didn't reply. By noon, Meridian had lost 4 major clients. By 2 p.m., their stock had dropped 6%, not catastrophic, but enough to make investors nervous. By 4 p.m., Derek was apparently locked in a conference room with the board, Meridian's legal team, and a very expensive lawyer who was almost certainly explaining that yes, I was within my rights, and no, they couldn't force me to unlock the system. At 5:17, I got an email from Robert Klein, the former CEO. Subject line, let's talk. I met Robert the next morning at a coffee shop in Fremont. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, but his eyes were still sharp. Maya. He shook my head, half smile on his face. I heard you've had an interesting week. You could say that. He ordered us both coffee, and we sat by the window. He didn't waste time. Derek called me last night. Panicking. Said you'd sabotaged the company. Robert leaned back. I pulled out the licensing agreement. Realized he never read it. Neither did the board, apparently. I tried to remind him I built StreamLine. He didn't want to hear it. I believe you. Robert sighed. Look, Derek's an idiot. I didn't pick him, the board did, against my recommendation. They wanted someone who'd cut costs fast. Turns out he cut the wrong person. So what now? The board wants to negotiate. They'll agree to your terms, $15,000 a month, back payment, full public acknowledgement of your patent and contributions. Derek will issue a formal apology. I stirred my coffee. And Derek? He's done. Board's voting him out tomorrow. They're offering you his position, COO. With a contract that protects your IP indefinitely. I let that sit for a moment. COO. Corner office. The job that should have been a stepping stone, not a battlefield. I'll think about it. Robert smiled. That's more than he deserves. But Maya, don't let anger make your decision. You've already won. Now decide what you actually want. I took the COO position. Not because I wanted Derek's office or his title, but because I wanted to rebuild Meridian the right way, where people who create things get credit, where engineers aren't redundant, where the people doing the real work aren't invisible. Derek cleaned out his desk on a Thursday. I didn't watch. I was too busy meeting with Linda and the warehouse managers, planning how to bring StreamLine fully back online and start training Kyle properly, because it turned out he wasn't incompetent, just undersupported and thrown into a role he wasn't ready for. The first thing I did as COO was revise the employee IP agreement so that creators retained ownership rights and the company licensed fairly. The second thing was to make sure every engineer's name appeared on the work they built. And the gold pen Derek used to sign my termination papers? I found it in his desk drawer. I gave it to Kyle. Here's what I learned: your work speaks louder than anyone else's words, but only if you protect it. I could have let Derek erase me. I could have walked away quietly, taken the severance, found another job. But I'd spent years building something that mattered, and I wasn't going to let someone rewrite that story just because he had a bigger office. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just knowing your worth and making sure the people who underestimated you have to face the truth on a Monday morning when the servers go dark. If this story hit home, do me a favor, like this video, drop a comment about a time someone underestimated you, and subscribe because I've got more stories like this coming. Your support keeps these conversations going. I still see Derek occasionally. Seattle's not that big. He's working for a startup now, smaller office, smaller ego, or so I've heard. I don't think about him much anymore. Because here's the truth, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so good, so undeniable, that no one can ever pretend you didn't matter. I built StreamLine. I own it. And every time a driver gets their route on time or a warehouse processes a shipment without a hitch, that's my signature on the world. Derek just signed the paperwork.